Hello and welcome to Facebook Live with the Seasoned Spouse. My name is Lizanne and I'm the blogger behind the Seasoned Spouse Military Advice. Today, I want to talk about a very important topic for all military families, which is military kids. So April is the month of the military child, and it's the time when we not only celebrate the resiliency and the strength and the endurance of our great military kids, but we also talk about the challenges of military life and what we could be doing better to support and encourage military kids as they face the challenges of a military lifestyle. So thank you for joining me today, and we're going to be talking about the good things, the bad things, and the ugly parts of being a military child. So if you are a viewer who grew up as a military child or a military brat, if you don't mind that term, then of course we want to hear your opinion. We value your story and your perspective in this. I did not grow up as a military kid, but I'm a mom of 4 wonderful military children, and I have helped raise them through my husband's multiple deployments. We have lived overseas for 3 years. They've moved across the country. So our kids have been through a lot, and seeing life through their eyes and from their perspective has really given me a lot of sympathy and a lot of motivation to make life better for military kids. So if you want to join in at any time in this conversation, feel free to join in the comments. I'll be reading them as we go. I'll be answering questions and sharing perspective from other military wives and military parents and people who grew up as military kids. So, of course, we want to hear your perspective. And I want to just start off by saying that in some cases, military experience may vary. So there's a lot of examples of military kids who are doing great and have had a lot of success and a lot of positive outcomes from the challenges of military life. And we want to uplift and applaud and celebrate those kids. But we also want to acknowledge that not everyone has the same experience when it comes to the military. And some families endure a lot more moves or a lot more challenges or a lot more hardship assignments than others. So we certainly don't want to downplay the challenges of some military kids. And I am not one to sugarcoat things and say that everything is fine when it's not. So we're going to have a very real discussion today. And I'd like to start off by inviting my viewers that if you know a brave military child, if you are either a parent or a aunt or uncle or a friend of some great military kids, then go ahead and leave a little heart, little love on this video. I'd love to see who our viewers are and where our military kids are coming from. And then if you know some military kids who have faced significant struggles in military life, then you can go ahead and leave a sad face in the reactions, and that'll kind of let us know what perspective you're coming from as well. So go ahead and leave those. And as I said earlier, great, and thanks. We already have some military kid viewers and parents in the audience. Thank you. I did not grow up as a military child. I actually had very little connection to the military growing up. I had an uncle who was drafted in the Korean War and didn't talk about it very much. And I had a grandfather who had served in World War II and didn't talk about it very much. So military lifestyle and military families and military challenges were not really on my radar as a kid, and I lived the first half of my life blissfully unaware of what military families go through. And then just after high school, I met my husband. He joined the Marine Corps, and the rest is history. So for the past 17 years, we have been together. We've had 4 children. We've lived overseas. We've moved a variety of times. And our kids have been through a lot. And there was definitely a moment in his career when we had to seriously sit down and consider what impact this was going to have on the kids. We had already had our first baby when he was reaching the end of his original 8-year enlistment contract. And the original plan had been for him to get out of the Marine Corps at that point. So even when we married, after years of dating, I hadn't fully signed on to be a military wife. I didn't expect to raise military kids. I thought we would just finish out his contract and then be done before the kids even learned how to talk. And unfortunately, because of the economy and because of a variety of other things at the time, him getting out was not a realistic possibility and was not going to be a very good way to take care of our family. So we decided together that the best thing for all of us was for him to stay in the military and for me to be able to stay home and raise our children, which has been great. And here we are. That was about 9 years ago when our first child was a baby. So now our oldest is 9 years old, almost 10. And this has been a challenging life, but it has also been a very good one for our family. So over the years, I have come to appreciate a lot of things about military kids and a lot of the challenges that military families face. And I want to shed light on those challenges and really discuss them and bring them up and find ways that we can work together to make things a little bit better and a little bit easier in this military life. So let's start off with discussing the good things about being a military kid, because in the month of the military child, I think we have a lot to celebrate and a lot of incredible military children in our lives. So as I'm talking, if you are thinking of a great military kid that you know, whether it's your own or a neighbor or a friend, or if you have a great story about a military kid, then go ahead and share it in the comments. We'd love to see that, and we'd love to read that out loud and share it with our viewers. So when I think about military kids and some of the characteristics that define them, I thought of 5 different words, which were adaptable, empathetic, broad worldview, that's a few words, but that's okay, resilient, and adventurous. So let's talk about these great positive characteristics of military kids. Above everything else, military kids are adaptable. Okay, they have usually lived in a variety of homes in various states and parts of the country, maybe different parts of the world. They have been through challenging situations. They've been the new kid at school more times than they can count. They know how to face change and face new situations. And while that's very difficult as a kid, especially if it's a more shy and reserved and sensitive child, that can be a very hard thing for them to experience. However, usually in the long run, military parents and people who grew up as military kids will tell you that it has made them so much more prepared and able to face challenges as adults. Going away to college is not a big thing for a military kid the way it is for someone who's lived in the same house for 20 years with their family every day, because a military kid has been separated from their parents, has been on long distance moves, has been in challenging situations where they don't know anyone. So most kids that grow up in military life will say that they felt more confident and more ready to face change and to deal with new situations because they were able to adapt and they had been in those types of situations before. So if you are a parent with a military kid who is throwing a fit because of a deployment, or really putting their foot down about this next PCS move, or really struggling with leaving their best friend, I know that that just kind of tears your heart and makes you question whether you're doing the right thing for them by dragging them through military life. And just remind yourself that while it might be hard now, in the long run, this is going to make them a stronger and a better person. And that's not always something you can explain to a 3-year-old, but it hopefully will comfort your heart as a parent to know that even though it's hard for them right now, it doesn't mean you're making the wrong choice. So the next thing I think about with our military kids is that they are empathetic. That means they can put themselves in someone else's shoes and sort of reach out to others and see things from another person's perspective. And I've witnessed this from many kids at an elementary school age. I think military kids, because they're used to being the new kid in town, or they know how it feels when they're upset because the parent deploys, that they are able to recognize those same sensations and those same emotions in their classmates and their peers, and they're able to reach out to them and connect with them in ways that we might never expect a regular, I'll say civilian child, even though I know all military kids are civilians, a non-military child might not be able to connect and reach out to others in the same way. So I'll give an example. We were recently preparing for a deployment last year. This was not the first deployment that my kids remembered. They had already been through several. And as we were going through some trainings and some workups, my oldest child shared that one of the kids in her class had a dad who had just deployed. Not in our unit, different unit, but same school on a military base. So of course, lots of deployments. And she discussed how this kid seemed very quiet and he seemed very upset and he'd been acting out a lot. And before I even said anything, she said to me, "Mom, I think he's upset because his dad deployed, and I know how hard that can be. So I tried to be extra nice to him at lunchtime." And that just touched me so much because I hadn't said a single thing about, "Hey, remember how hard it was for you last time you went through this?" She was immediately making those connections, relating to somebody else's life challenges, and finding a way to reach out and connect with them. And I think that that is an incredible skill. That's what we want to be teaching our kids, whether they're military kids or otherwise. Every parent wants their child to be empathetic to others, caring, and aware of others' challenges, because life is not always just about us, right? So when we see that our military kids are reaching out to others in the community and supporting classmates and peers and friends in their community, I feel like we have given them an incredible gift. And if it's military life with all of its challenges and all of its deployments and moves that has produced that empathy and that strength, well, then I'm okay with that. That can be one good perk of military life, that it makes our children more sensitive and empathetic to others. So yes, military kids are adaptable. Yes, military kids are empathetic. And the next thing I think of that's positive for military kids is a broad world view. Now, maybe you've been lucky enough to live overseas with your children and expose them to another language and expose them to other cultures. But even if you haven't, even if you've been at the same exact duty station for your kids' whole lives, I want you to think about something. Someone in their class has probably lived overseas, maybe in Germany or Japan. Those are some pretty popular stations, but there are military stations and assignments all over the world. And even if their classmates have not lived overseas, they've probably lived in other states. They have traveled and have family members in other states, and they have just been witness to a variety of cultures and traditions and history that are different from the way things are at your current military base. And I think that is an invaluable thing that we share with our military kids. We expose them to the fact that the world is so much bigger than this town, so much bigger than this state that they're living in right now. There are other states out there where people do things a little bit differently. There are other countries out there where people speak another language. And that is something that you can't teach without living in other places and being exposed to people who have lived in other places. So we were lucky enough to live overseas for 3 years. We lived in Spain at Naval Station Rota, and it was an incredible experience. It came with plenty of challenges and hardships. So it was not exactly a tropical vacation for 3 years. But in all of that, our kids were exposed to so much. And they learned, first of all, that there are parts of the world where not everyone speaks English. And so when we were waiting for recent PCS orders, one of the questions that my 6-year-old asked me was, "Mom, when we go to our next duty station, do you think they'll speak English there?" And that's kind of a cute question, but the fact that that was a primary concern in his heart showed me that he's really thinking about the way things are in other parts of the world and the way families live and traditions are in other countries. And he's aware that there are places where English is not the main language, and he'd have to learn to adapt to a new school and new friends and understand a new culture. And the cool thing is that all my kids are willing to do that. So we did not get overseas orders. We will continue to live in an English-speaking country, but they've already witnessed life in Spain, learning Spanish, learning to adapt to a different schedule, a different way of life. And they know that that's the way people live in Spain, and that people in America have some differences and might live differently, and that's okay. So it's very exciting when we can share that broad worldview and history and culture and traditions from other parts of the world with our kids. Many military families will tell you that an overseas assignment, of course, it has its challenges, but it also gives them the opportunity to travel and experience things that they never dreamed they'd be able to do before. So that's one small perk of military life. Finally, there's two more. A positive word that is often used to describe military kids is resilient. Can I please get a like or a thumbs up for every time that you have heard someone say that military kids are so resilient? It seems to be the buzzword for military kids. And it's true, because they have been through so many challenges and so many stressful situations that even as adults, we have trouble handling. So we drag our military kids into this lifestyle full of PCS moves and deployments and one parent gone for training all the time. And that's not something that the kids got to a voice and that they got to sign up for. They were brought into it. But they have also learned how to handle those situations. And so they have dealt with living with just one parent while their other parent was out of communication for weeks at a time. And they have dealt with saying goodbye to their friends and their teachers and moving to a completely unknown town on the other side of the country. Being able to handle those situations and knowing who they are inside and defining who their family is deep down, those are incredible life lessons that you can't teach except through challenge and through stress. So that's why universally everyone describes military kids as being resilient. So if you are a viewer and you grew up as a military kid, I'd really love to hear an example or a story that you have of a crazy, challenging situation that you went through and something from military life that made you more resilient and more adaptable. And the final positive aspect of military kids is that they are adventurous. All right, military kids are used to moving every few years. Once they've lived in a house for a few years, they start asking, where are we going to go next? What's it going to be like at the next town? And I think from an early age, we give them that travel bug and that sense of adventure and that desire to see more of the world and kind of recreate their lives and recreate who they are. And is it hard? Absolutely. Like I said, I'm not sugarcoating military life and saying that military kids have this carefree, adventurous lifestyle, but they do come through these challenges with a lot of benefits. So they're ready to make new friends. They know how to establish themselves and reach out and make new friends at a new school. They know how to deal with unusual situations like having their parent be gone or deployed to a combat zone or helping out their parent who's remaining behind. And sometimes they've even gotten to do some unusual things like live in another country, or in our family's case, going tent camping from one side of the country to the other during a PCS move. That's not something I ever really wanted to do or thought that I would do with my kids. But when we had a PCS move from overseas and then starting at the East Coast, and we drove all the way to the West Coast, we brought our tent and our camping supplies, and we stayed at different parks and national park locations across the way. And that is something that our kids will always remember, and they enjoyed it. And they keep asking us, when are we going camping again? When is our next trip? So I think that those 5 traits, adaptable, empathetic, broad worldview, resilient, and adventurous, those are some of the great positive things that we see in our military kids. It is something wonderful that we bring to them from this military lifestyle. And those are the traits that we should celebrate and continue to build up in our military children. So again, if you're watching and you want to share a comment or a story about ways that you see those traits in a military kid that you know, please go ahead and feel free to join in. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit because, like I said, we're going to talk about the good and also the bad and the ugly. And I think during the month of the military child, we sometimes see a lot of energy and building up and praising military kids. And that's all completely legitimate. Like I just said, they have these great positive traits. But it sometimes glosses over the real challenges and the real struggles that military kids and military families are going through. And I feel that it would be a disservice to discuss the wonderful things about military kids without simultaneously sharing some of the real challenges and hardships that they are going through. So in this portion, if you and your family or your military kid have faced particular challenges that are brought on by military life, then go ahead and share those in the comments, and we're going to discuss some of those things too. So I thought of 5 more traits that are the negative challenges of being a military kid. And the first is nomadic. Military kids live a nomadic lifestyle. Some move more often than others, but most military kids can expect to move a bit more often than their non-military peers. And this can mean that military kids grow up without roots. They've lived in so many houses in so many states that they don't know where they belong. And when they have to answer that age-old question, oh, where are you from? A military kid doesn't have a very good answer to that because they're like, well, do you mean where I was born or where we lived before this or where I went to high school? Because those are 3, 4, 5 different answers that they might have. So there's a real challenge to being a person who doesn't have roots and doesn't feel like they belong anywhere. And that can leave kids feeling like outsiders and feeling alone, even as they go into adulthood. So I'm going to read the comment here. It says, it's like military life in general. It's viewed as unpatriotic to say that anything is hard. There you go. My son doesn't adjust well to change, and my Marine is his person, so deployment is very hard on his heart. I can understand that. If you don't mind me asking, how old is your son? And we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth. But I think you are certainly not the only military family going through that. So I said earlier that military kids are very adaptable. Yes, they are. Are they adaptable at age 2 and 3? No, not so much. This is a skill that is learned through a long life as a military kid and growing up with a parent who has a military career. And it does not come without its challenges. So I said that military kids live a nomadic life, and they can also live a very distant life. They can feel distant from their family members and relatives who are far away from their current duty station. They can feel distant from their friends. And as this viewer just mentioned, they can feel very distant from their deployed parent. Not having that connection is extremely challenging on military kids, and we cannot gloss over that and talk through it as if everything is going to be okay. So you have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. So they have seen their fair share of deployments and moves and military life challenges. And that is a lot for a kid to go through. And that's a very challenging age too, because that's just a little bit older than mine. And I think a lot of my kids are still at the age where, you know, family is everything, and they're young enough that as long as mom is home, I'm kind of their rock and their person, and I can keep things normal and keep things going during deployments. But as they get older and you get middle schoolers, they start having that rock be their friends or their deployed parent or other members of the community, that when you go to move and uproot them from that community, that is a lot more challenging than it was when they were 4 or 5 years old. Oh my goodness. So at the end of your 10th deployment, that is a lot. And my heart and my sympathies go out to you. No deployment is easy, but doing it again and again and again is exhausting. And so we are here for you. I do encourage you and I support you through this. And mostly I just want you to know that your kids are not alone and you are not alone facing these challenges. And like you said earlier, sometimes it's viewed as unpatriotic to say that there's anything hard about military life. And I think that that's not helping anyone. If we all fake being stronger than we really are, and we all act like the kids are going to be okay, it's all right, then we're not actually addressing these issues. We're glossing over them, and that's not helping our kids. So the third characteristic that I think is a challenge of being a military kid is lack of support. And this can be support from family members and relatives who are far away through no fault of their own. It's hard to support a grandchild when the only communication you have with them is occasional phone calls and Skype video chats and things like that. There's many relatives who would like to be more involved with their military kids and grandkids, and just because of distance, they can't be. But you can also feel a lack of support from the surrounding community. Some military bases are in better neighborhoods and better towns than others. So if you are in a current location where the surrounding town is very supportive of military and has lots of outreach and nonprofit organizations and giveaways and things like that, that's great. Enjoy that and treasure that, because not every military base has that experience. And some military kids grow up in environments where the towns around base can be more hostile, less supportive of military life and military families. And that tends to make our military families kind of shell up and isolate themselves and come up with that idea that, you know, the military supports their own and we're going to take care of each other and we don't need outside support. And that might be somewhat true, but again, it's not helping our kids when we isolate ourselves from the surrounding community and act like we don't need outside support. So the more that we can connect kids to the community around our base, whether that's through sports teams or extracurricular activities or going to school off base, having mentors and adult leadership and programs that they connect to outside of the military environment, those things can really encourage them. The last two concerns, which are some pretty major concerns, are education issues and special needs. And these are the areas where I think military families suffer the most. And this is where we've become at least a little bit vocal in speaking up and voicing our concerns. Education issues vary from one base to the other. So again, if you're at a base that has a good school and a good support system and good networks around you, you are very lucky and enjoy that. But do not think that that is the case at every single military base. So unfortunately, there are some military bases that are in locations where, because of taxes and because of a variety of other political factors, there are not great school choices. And military families don't always have much of an option for where to send their kid. There may or may not be a school on base. There may only be one local public school district that they can attend. And maybe it's not a very good one. There may not be private schools that are affordable or realistic for military families, especially on a single military income. So there are certainly education issues that we need to continue to discuss and continue to listen to others, even if we're not experiencing that exact concern on our own military base, because you never know where you're going to be stationed next. And just because things are complacent and happy at your current location, you might suddenly find yourself being more of an advocate for change when you get sent to another military base in the future. And the same can be said of children with special needs. There are an incredible amount of special needs families in the military. I don't have official statistics on that, but my gut instinct is that a lot of military families who have children with special physical, emotional, or mental needs, that they remain in the military because of the supposedly great TRICARE health coverage that we have that allows families who could not otherwise afford healthcare and specialists and expensive treatment plans to continue to get the things that they need for their special needs children. And on one hand, that's a great thing about TRICARE. But on the other hand, I think it's safe to say that TRICARE is not always perfect. And there are tons of loopholes and there are tons of families falling through the cracks. And sometimes it can be the lack of specialists that are available at certain military base locations. There are some very small and remote military bases that do not have state-of-the-art healthcare and do not have very good access to specialists. And if your service member is sent there and they do not have doctors that can treat your children, that leaves your family in an extremely challenging situation of whether or not you're able to move with the service member and whether or not your child is going to be taken care of the way that they need to be. So yes, there is the EFMP program, which is Exceptional Family Member Program. And EFMP status is very helpful. It has improved the communication between chain of command and families with special needs and trying to advocate for special needs families on military bases. But EFMP status also has its shortfalls, and sometimes it restricts families from going to certain duty locations and can make families end up spending more time apart from their service member. So I want to acknowledge the strides that have been made in education and healthcare over the past few years, but I also want to acknowledge that nothing is perfect, and there are still many families who are looking for more, looking for better answers, and wishing that there were more solutions. So that brings me to our next point, which is the way that we wrap this all together, and that is, what can we do for our military kids? How can we support military kids through all these challenging aspects of military life? And so I have a few ideas. And the first is simply to listen to them. Listen to your children's concerns. Listen to their fears. Acknowledge their frustrations and their emotions, even when you think they're overreacting. Even when you want to tell them, it's going to be fine, honey, you're going to make tons of new friends. Reassurance from an adult does not always fix the struggles and insecurities that a child is going through. So yes, encourage your children. Yes, be positive when you're discussing PCS moves and deployments, but don't sugarcoat things too much. Allow them the space and the respect to express what they're frustrated with and to talk about the things that they're afraid of and that are bothering them. Some people are afraid to have those very real conversations with military kids, especially when it comes to combat deployments and the possibility of their deployed parent being killed. That's a very serious conversation to have with a 3-year-old, and maybe it doesn't need to happen with a 3-year-old. At that age, there's ways that you can say, daddy's fighting the bad guys, and we're going to pray that he will stay safe, and we will hope that he comes home and he loves you very much. Those are all truthful, positive things that you can say without having to get into the nitty-gritty things that are weighing on your heart as an adult. But you need to understand that as military kids get older, they develop those concerns for themselves, and they have very real fears and very real questions that if you are their parent, you might be the only one who can answer for them. So I beg you to listen to your military kids and ask them what their concerns are and what their challenges are when you're going through different stressful parts of military life. The next thing that we can do for our military children is to build relationships. This is so important, not just to build relationships with our own kids and with our neighbor or our friends' military kids, but to help them build relationships with the whole community. I talked before about how military kids often feel like they don't have roots and they don't have support from the local off-base community. And the way that we can address that is by getting them involved with programs and activities off-base. The way that we can build them up during a deployment is by finding those male mentors, by finding an adult who can lead their sports team or encourage them in their talents and help them to get through that time when they're missing their deployed parent. So if you feel like you can't do it all on your own, it's because you don't have to and you're not supposed to. We need to build those relationships with other families around us, military or non-military, and we need to help our kids to build those relationships too. Sometimes we need to be proactive in reaching out to family members and helping military kids to connect with their grandparents and their aunts and uncles back home. Because a kid isn't going to pick up the phone and make a call, but maybe we need to schedule a time when grandma's time zone is going to work out when the kid is home from school and things like that. So building up that community and building those relationships is one of the ways that we can strengthen our military kids and help them to feel grounded in all of this. Another thing we can do is to increase awareness of resources for military kids. There are so many organizations and programs and nonprofit networks that want to help military families and military kids. So many of them give away free stuff to military kids. But if no one knows about their organization and no one knows about their free offers, then it's being wasted and we're not taking advantage of it. So I try on my website, the Seasoned Spouse blog, I try to share many different resources for military families. Googling when you move to a new area, Googling about your base, asking word of mouth for different programs and different support in the area. I have been amazed by the variety of services and programs and gifts that are available to military families, especially at our current location. And some of them I just discovered by asking other families. And they said, "Oh yeah, you didn't know about this program?" And I said, "No, it didn't exist at our other base. I'd never come across it before. But out here, it's a thing." So every time you change locations, make sure that you're asking around to stay connected to the community and find out what resources are available for your kids. There may be, there's military discounts on things like youth sports and going to summer camp and doing all types of activities on base. During deployment, there is a variety of programs that offer books and teddy bears and customized pillows and daddy dolls and things like that to help kids through a deployment. And in fact, I list a lot of those resources in my Ultimate Deployment Guide, which is available on the Seasoned Spouse website. I'll leave a link to that in the comments so that if you are going through a deployment with military kids, you'll have access to some of these free resources. And finally, what we need to do for our military kids is to improve education options and improve medical care. And this will not happen overnight. This is going to be an ongoing process, but it's something that military families need to keep speaking up about. This will happen through legislation and reforms in tax law that we need to stay up to date and informed about and continue to vote and continue to be vocal about. But it can also happen on a local level by parents being involved in their school PTA, whether it's the military-based school or an off-base school. I know you're only there for a couple years and your kid's going to come to this school, just do a few grades and then leave. That's no reason you shouldn't be connected and involved and letting your voice be heard when you are addressing a new school district and seeking out better education options for them. The same goes with medical care. TRICARE is not going to improve or change unless we are vocalizing the need for change. So military families need increased access to specialists, especially at remote duty stations, whether that happens through an expansion of the TRICARE network or improved coverage. I'm not choosy. I just want families to have more affordable options. And the EFMP program, which I mentioned, the Exceptional Family Member Program, needs to continue to work to serve families while allowing the military service member to serve as well. So those are the ways that I think we can truly help and make a difference for our military kids. Listen to them, build relationships, increase awareness of resources for military kids, improve the education options for our children, and improve medical care, especially for military kids with special needs. So if you have any experience with success in those areas and you want to share something that has changed or improved for your family, then feel free to share it in the comments. Even if it's not during this live session, I always go back and read the comments afterwards. And if you want to share a challenge that your family is facing, again, you can share that in the comments and we will discuss some of the ways that we can work through and provide resources and support you as you go through that challenge of military life. So if there's any final questions, I'll give you a moment to type them. And like I said in the comments, I will leave a link to my Ultimate Deployment Guide. It is a 28-page guide that I have custom designed and produced for military families specifically to help them through deployments. And it has all the practical resources you would want, the checklists to get you organized, the legal paperwork that you need before and during a deployment, the emergency contacts that you need to deal with different deployment situations. And it also has a lot of fun planning sheets for your bucket list during deployment and different activities to do in your area and meal planning and goal setting and things like that. Plus there are questions and guides to get you through the different stages of deployment, the pre-deployment stress, that exciting time before homecoming. All of that is explored and discussed so that you can feel prepared, you can address these concerns with your spouse and your kids, and you are ready for anything that deployment will throw your way. So that is called the Ultimate Deployment Guide, and it is available on the Seasoned Spouse site, which is www.seasonedspouse.com. So I thank you so much for taking the time to discuss military kids and celebrate them during this month of the military child. And I leave you with the challenge to work on one of those 5 areas, which was, again, listening, building relationships, increasing awareness of resources, improving education options, and improving medical care. And if we can improve those things during the month of the military child, then I think we will make great strides in creating stronger and more healthy and resilient military kids. So thanks so much for watching. This is the Seasoned Spouse signing off.